Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show, where we share the secrets of how we are building a rapidly growing law practice. Over the last 9 years, we have scaled from zero attorneys to over 25 and doing over $15 million in revenue. And my purpose is to document what's working, what's not working in our practice, with hopes that you can take that and you can recontextualize that and shorten your success curve. Now, I've got a great guest today that I'm super excited about. We put this on the calendar about 3 months ago, and I've been looking forward today to have Luis Scott with me here. And I first became aware of you, Luis, just by watching you on LinkedIn. I started seeing your postings, went to your site and kind of read all your posts that you put out, followed the links to your other websites, and was real intrigued, started finding you in other podcasts, hearing your interviews. And I was really drawn to some of your leadership philosophies, which I thought was really refreshing. And what I think is the most attractive thing about you is that you have done it. You're not just like an academic who read a bunch of books and is now consulting, telling people to do it. You've actually done that with your firm, Bader Scott. I know you've built that to over 150 teammates, and you're doing over 100 million, I believe, in yearly settlements. So, I mean, super, super impressive. You're in the Atlanta area. And I just know our audience has a lot to learn from your insights. So I'm excited to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our talk.
One of the things that I've heard you talk a lot about is your candor. I've heard you talk about real numbers in your business. You go there where a lot of people are just they come at it with a real sense of just fear around sharing numbers, and that, but you have an abundance mentality. So you've talked a lot about some of your personal challenges. So I'd love to kind of start there and maybe just talk through kind of your story and how you've come back from some pretty big setbacks in your time.
Yeah, my entire story, I guess, is probably more than a book, but I did write a book called It Has to Hurt that documented kind of the genesis of what I began to create as my philosophy of life, which is life does hurt. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say, it doesn't have to hurt or whatever, but life hurts because dealing with people is hard. And so my entire story has been a story of failure, things that I've had to overcome and things that I've had to do to overcome these failures, and how you can actually do this as well. Success is not a linear path. It's a path of a little bit of growth, then some plateau, sometimes going down the mountain, then some more growth, then a plateau. And so really that's kind of been my story. But yeah, I've in my past, I've suffered a lot of setbacks. One of them was being injured in college. My entire goal was to be a professional athlete. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I came from Puerto Rico. My dad played Double-A ball, so I thought I had the pedigree. Not only did he play Double-A ball, but he was also a track athlete. He had a scholarship, to the university. And so I thought I was going to be a shoo-in, but I kept getting injured and injured and injured. And, having to recover from that and reset my goals and dreams, that was a hard thing for me. Having to recover from a personal divorce about 7 years ago now was a very big setback for me. Then a business divorce, having to recover from that. And what I've learned through...
Close were those together, those two?
They happen at the same time. So yeah. So if you want to talk about beating somebody while they're down, 6 months after I've signed the papers of my personal divorce, I signed the papers of my professional divorce. And it was a really hard time. I always joke that I went home, I laid on the couch, I ate ice cream for 2 weeks, and trying to figure out what my life was going to be like. It's a joke because I don't even like ice cream, so I'm not really sure if that happened or not. But I was definitely on the couch trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I think that at the end of the day, what I took from everything that I went through is that your testimony, I'm a person of faith, and I always say your testimony is not as valuable unless you've gone through a test. So it's the test that makes the testimony. The thing that makes you the most valuable is the thing that made it the most difficult for you in your life. And so for me, I look back and I go, I'm thankful that this happened, not because I want to go through pain and struggle, but because it's become a part of my story of triumph. And that to me is invaluable.
Yeah. So how long ago was the business divorce?
So both of them happened about 7 years ago.
Okay.
At the same time.
Now, coming out of that whole experience, as you're sitting on the couch eating your bonbons and so forth, what what was the next step for you? How did you work through that emotionally, stand back up and say, I'm going to go at it again? Because obviously you went out and started another firm after that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think for me, it was one of the things that people don't really appreciate is that you have to work your muscles before you need to use them. And so if you had to pick up a car and you needed a certain amount of strength for that, it would probably behoove you to be in the gym working out before you need to pick up the car. And I think that before you pick yourself up from a situation like that, it's probably in your best interest to be working that emotional muscle, that mental muscle of toughness. And so fortunately, I had met a mentor in my early 20s that used to always tell me, leaders are readers and people stay slaves because they refuse to open a book. And so I had been reading a lot. I had been like trying to develop myself and improve myself and figure out myself and just like in this journey of personal discovery. And so when this happened, I was flexing the muscles that I had already accumulated in the mental gym, in the emotional gym. And so was I knocked down? It's like, any great fighter who goes into the boxing ring will get, a little foggy when they get hit in the head. They may even fall down. But the reason they get up is because of the training they did before they got knocked down. So yes, I got knocked down, but I flexed that muscle that I had been working on. And I think that that's really a lesson for people who are listening to this right now and who want to know, how do I recover from setback? It's start right now before the setback happens, because that's what you're going to have to use that work in order for this to be a reality.
So now, when did you start your next firm following that divorce?
So the business ended February officially, and I started the new firm in March, the very next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you start that with a partner?
No, so I started that on my own, and I actually went to one of these consultations with a guy who helps you figure out your life. I had met him through a friend, and I called him and I said, hey, can I do one of those sessions that you do to help you figure out your life? He's like, it's going to be $4.99. And I was like, $4.99? Holy cow, how long is this call going to be? And now I look back and I'm like, I charge $2,000 an hour for consulting. It's like, that was like nothing. But it was actually one of the most valuable things that I did, because I went through the series of things I could do in my life. Like, I could be a speaker, I could be an author, I could be a consultant, I could be a lawyer. And at the end of it, he was like, dude, the only way you're going to make money right now is to go be a lawyer. So go ahead and start your firm. You'll become a consultant, because my ultimate dream has always been to be a speaker. Like that's what I've always wanted. And but he said, you need to be a lawyer, you need to set the foundation, you need to do that. And so the next month, on my birthday, March 5, I went and started the firm. I launched it, and really the rest was history, because in my first month, I brought in 25 clients. Wow. And I realized that I had a knack for developing business.
And it's a personal injury. Right?
It wasn't everything, actually, because you need money to pay the bills, so I couldn't wait the period for contingency. So I was taking immigration, criminal, family law. I mean, I did my first custody battle in that time period. Like, you want to talk about, I would not recommend somebody take on a custody case. No family law experience whatsoever. I take on a custody case. Fortunately, I was smart enough to co-counsel that with one of my really good friends who got me through the process and went to court for me. We actually won the case, but it was, I did anything that I could to bring in cash.
You were just hungry, literally.
I was literally hungry, and people don't know this, and I feel comfortable saying this today, but my house was in foreclosure and my car was in repossession at that time, because what happened is that I lost a lot in my divorce, and then when my firm split, I went about a year without getting paid from the firm as we were, negotiating the buyout and so forth. So it wasn't like I signed papers and the next day I received like a lump sum. It was like months before I received anything, and I had just gone through, a very, very costly financial separation from my divorce. So yeah, it was tough.
So when did your firm start to focus from doing everything, just trying to put money in the bank account? When did it go from that to start narrowing your focus in on personal injury?
So at the time, I one of my good friends, his name was Seth Bader, and so now the firm is called Bader Scott, because we joined up several months later. In my 5th or 6th month, I think, after starting the firm generated 100,000 in revenue just from hustling. I was signing on average 20 to 25 cases a month for the first 5 or 6 months. Seth approached me. We had been friends for a while. He's like, why don't we just join together? You're out there. You don't want to be a lawyer. I need somebody to operate my business. He had about 25 employees at the time. I had 6. And we went through like a long process of like really discussing how this would work. I didn't want to give up my firm unless I was going to be a partner. And so that was the only way I was going to give up my firm, because in my, like I said, in my 5th or 6th month, I had already generated 100,000 with 6 employees. So it was super profitable. It's like 30-40% profitability. And so we joined together at that time. I was able to abandon all the cases that I didn't need to do. I did have a lot of immigration cases. Okay. And then we went right into workers' comp and personal injury because his firm was already generating a little bit of revenue at the time.
Got it. So you really bring the savvy on attracting clients, and he just loves the technician part of the business, it sounds like.
At the beginning, he was still like very focused on being a lawyer. And I think to a certain extent, he is more focused on being a lawyer, but he's also very, very smart marketer. And he really took on our full marketing strategy after I came on. So he was doing marketing, I was doing the operations. In the first year, we hired 84 people. So I was responsible for bringing all that team on, and he was responsible for doing the marketing. And then after the first year, he was like, you know what? I probably don't need to be a lawyer anymore. And then he transitioned out of that as well.
Got it. And so the firm today has how many practicing lawyers?
So it fluctuates, but we have about 30 to 32 lawyers.
Okay. And are these all throughout Atlanta or beyond Atlanta?
Right now, the majority of our firm is in Atlanta, but we have offices in different locations. So we do have some lawyers in the West Georgia area. We do have a lawyer in the north of Atlanta area. And then we have an office in Savannah, Georgia, which is 4 hours away, but there's no lawyer that's there. Most of them are in the headquarters.
Got it. Okay. I know that you have about 150 teammates and contractors in the firm today.
Yeah, so we're up to about 190 right now, yeah.
Oh, 190. Okay. I'm reading all the information here. Okay, so if 30 of them are lawyers, 32-ish, what are the other folks doing? How do you divide up the responsibilities?
So I get this question because people are always wondering, should I have a staff-heavy practice or should I have a lawyer-heavy practice? I made the decision probably in 2019. I wrote a 220-page PowerPoint presentation where I drew up what I called the vision of a law firm. And it was the vision of our firm at the time, but it was really the vision of every firm. And that was that if you wanted to have a predictable law firm that paid you even when you weren't working, you had to have a firm that was dependent on systems, not on lawyer personalities. And so we made a decision that we were going to be staff heavy, because staff heavy meant that it wasn't based on the personality of the lawyer. What you see a lot of times is smaller firms, not firms like your size that have 25 lawyers, but in smaller firms that you have 5, 6, 7 lawyers, a lawyer leaves and it's devastating to the firm because the firm is dependent on that lawyer's personality to either attract new clients or retain new clients. And I didn't want that. I wanted every time a lawyer left that it was just business as usual, which is the case now. We could lose a lawyer and it's business as usual. Yes, we have to shuffle cases around and we have to find a new lawyer to replace them. But the business continues on because the relationship for the most part of the client and the firm is through the staff, not through the lawyer.
We have a fair amount of our team is actually international. So do you have that model too?
Not yet, but we are looking at getting more international virtual assistants. We have, I would say, probably somewhere between 10 and 20, depending on the function. Like we have some people who work in some marketing capacities. We have some people who work on the sales side, maybe on the intake side, but that's the extent of it. And we are in the process of looking for more of those, assets.
Okay. And what is your position on hybrid versus work from home, all in office?
Yeah, I mean, my position, people may say it's anecdotal and there's you can find stats for anything.
Yeah.
But working with 120 law firms now, my position is that people work better when they're in an office. And we could say that the reason is because people don't know how to manage them virtually. But that doesn't actually resolve the issue, right? Because one of the things that I get is, people will work just as well if they're at home, but you just have to have better managers. Well, it's hard to find better managers. So therefore, let's bring them back into the office. And I could go on for an hour about this. But one of the things that I challenge people when they bring up the work from home debate is all you have to do is analyze your revenue per employee. If you just tell me what your revenue per employee is, I can compare it to firms that do the same practice and tell you what their revenue per employee is working in the office. One of the things that the Small Business Administration says is that you should generate about $200,000 revenue per employee in a service-based business, right? And I don't know, I'm quoting this stat and I can't remember what year it was that this stat came out, but nevertheless, we could look that up and see what it is today. When you find virtual firms, like 100% virtual firms, you'll find them way low, like 110, 120, 130. And so they're not even meeting what the Small Business Administration says it should be. Firms that are in the office, and we've actually diagrammed this, and we're gonna publish this report once we have enough years of data. But firms that are in the office tend to have a much higher revenue per employee. We have a couple of firms that are almost in the 300,000 per employee for firms that are in office. And so I think the first question is asking what is acceptable to you, right? If you're comfortable with less revenue per employee because you want the lifestyle of work from home workforce and you think that creates some sort of asset to you in terms of employment, I'm not ideological. I'm not saying you have to have people work in the office, but I'm also not going to refute clear data that says you will generate more per employee if they come into the office. So to me, it's when somebody asks me that question that you just asked, my answer is it just depends on what kind of business you want. If you want, like I have a particular client right now who is just adamant, it doesn't matter the revenue per employee. I'm profitable and I want my employees to work from home because I want to work from home and I don't want an office, and it is what it is. If that's what you want, like cool, like you could still be, have a beautiful business and so forth. So it really just depends on what your goals are for your business. But I do think that if you look at practice areas in general, most people work better in an office, and it's the concept of the gym. You're going to work better if you're in the gym with a trainer than you are working at your house with a trainer on the TV telling you what to do.
Right. I knew you'd have a thoughtful answer to that. So we're struggling with that ourselves and coming up with the right methodology, but we're pretty much hybrid. So, and then we have a fair amount of, like I said, a fair amount of international. All those folks work from home, obviously, because we don't have offices over there. So.
Yeah, I think that one of the things is that you probably, if you were to diagram your revenue per employee, you'd probably find that you're somewhere in the middle to above average because you're in the hybrid space. But if you went all virtual, you would have the same outcome that these big, companies have, where they find people working 2 hours a day, where they find people working, getting their nails done or going to the gym midday, because we're all human. And I'll tell you, like I work from home, I'm at the house right now. Like when I get off this call, if I have a 30-minute break, I may turn on the office. I may turn on, I'm not going to go right back into working. Whereas when I'm in the office, I'm going to try to get my emails done. I'm going to try to have a conversation with an employee and really build a relationship there. It's just a different environment.
When you were quoting those stats, I pulled my phone out, did a real quick calc, so just to see where we're at on the average revenue per employee. So what I'm hearing you say is that the higher performing firms are closer to 300. Average is 200 where they need to be according to the government's publications. So right. For law firms, and I'd love to get into this in a moment with you because I know you're consulting with a bunch of firms, but best practices or benchmarks that you're seeing for the high performing law firms in the B2C space, so people law sort of stuff. What are you seeing those numbers come in at?
For a revenue per employee?
Yeah, revenue per employee numbers.
I would say, I wouldn't say that that's like the average. If I had to guess the average, I'd say it's somewhere between 225 and 265 is probably where most people are. My highest producing firms, like the ones that run super efficient, are in that 300 space. And our firm right now runs at around 317. So it just depends on the type of firm. Now, some firms can run a little bit higher. Personal injury firms have a teeny bit of a disadvantage because they can have a massive pipeline of revenue that's unrealized and have a much smaller staff. But I would say a good goal to shoot for would be like 225 to 260.
So you talked about your consulting business. Can you describe that?
Yeah, so 8-Figure Firm was like, it came out of this original desire that I had for teaching. The story I always give is I always wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to be a coach. Like my dream, if somebody gave me not $1 million, if somebody gave me the lottery, I used to say $1 million in college. Today it's more than sorry. If somebody gave me, it reminds me of Dr. Evil, $1 billion, and he's like, $1 billion is not a lot of money today. No, if I win the lottery, I would actually love to be a coach, but the problem is that I kind of am out of the techniques of I have the old techniques, so I'd have to coach old school. But no, I wanted to be a coach, and I wanted to be a teacher and coach. But the problem was that they didn't make any money, and I was very money motivated in my early 20s. I felt like I wanted to become wealthy. I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, so I wanted to be that difference maker and be the person who started the new generational a legacy for my family. And now all of my siblings, except I have a pastor brother, but all of my other siblings, we're all have turned out to be that legacy, dividers and become independently wealthy. But I was very money motivated, and I wanted to be a coach. So that didn't work out. So then I said, one day I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to be a coach of something, but I didn't know what it was. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of just trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I became a lawyer and then successful. And so 8-Figure Firm was just fulfilling that dream that I had in my 20s, 20 years later, which is a lesson within itself, is sometimes our dream for our life takes some time to materialize. And so I started 8-Figure Firm based on what I had learned from growing businesses. And I had spent, a considerable amount of time failing in businesses, which I document in my book, and then growing successful law firms and realizing there were some keys to growing a successful business. And I had the opportunity to try out those principles with one of my good friends who said, will you help me grow my firm? And we grew her firm from 700,000 to I think just under 6 million this year. And that was kind of the genesis of how we got started. And I ended up documenting that in a couple of books, one called The 9 Principles of Exponential Growth. And then the second book was called The King of Growth. And those books just outlined how you grow your business. And that's where I have a lot of passion, is helping people really grow the business, not of my dreams, but of their dreams. And everyone has a different dream for their business. And I feel like we've created a set of principles that if you execute them properly, will help you develop that business.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little further? I'm just curious on your process, like the 9 principles. So when you take on a new client, let's say it's a $1 million law firm that's got, say, 3 attorneys on their staff, and they're doing B2C, how do you start them into your process and get them going? And what does that look like for them?
Yeah, so our system is a 3-pillar system, and it's the foundation, intention, and transformation stage. And the first pillar is the foundation. It's setting them up for what I call repeatable, predictable business. And it's understanding what the vision and mission of the business is. And so there's 4 primary points in the foundational stage. It's vision, mission, values, and service standards. And then what we call the USP, which is generally speaking, your brand plus you. That's like what makes you unique. And it's funny because this morning I was telling someone, if a million people knew who you were in your state, in the state of Georgia, there's 11 million people. If 1 million people knew who Luis Scott was in the state of Georgia, that means 10 million people don't know who I am. If 1 million people knew you in the country, that means 330 million people don't know you. It's so hard to saturate. And so you are a unique proposition yourself. So if you take your brand, your vision, mission, and values and service standards, and you apply it to you, that's the appeal that you have. So understanding that is the foundational principle. So if I came into a $1 million firm, the first thing I'd ask is, do we have clearly defined vision, mission, value, service standards? And do we have a clearly defined brand and brand message? That's step number 1, because that's critical to really growing a predictable business, is understanding what those things are. And then step number 2 would be to take them to the intentional phase, which is how do we actually communicate that foundation? How do we communicate the vision, the mission, the values, the service standards? How do we communicate the USP? How do we communicate the brand message? How do we do that in a way that creates predictability? And so the intentional side is having an intentional brand, an intentional message, and intentional marketing. And so we work on developing intentionality through a business plan, marketing plan, hiring plan, and a budget. And that's the intentional phase. We're going to become super intentional about what we're going to do next year, both from a company goals standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from an execution standpoint. And then once they've achieved that, so now the person has a strong foundation, We understand the intentionality of their business. Now it's what we call transformation. I'm really big on this idea that you don't need policies and procedures until you have something systematized. You don't need something systematized until you have something that's predictable, excuse me. So a lot of people go, well, what are the 25 policies and procedures I need for my business? I don't know. What do you have that's predictable right now? That's what we need to systematize, is like understanding what do we do in these predictable scenarios. And so the transformation part is setting up the systems and the workflows and the operations and the job descriptions and the career pathways that create a sense of predictability in your business. So when I come into a firm, I'm looking at those three areas. Are they lacking foundation? Are they lacking in intention? Or are they lacking in transformation? Generally speaking, they're not lacking in transformation, because if they were in the transformation stage, they probably wouldn't be hiring me. They're usually lacking significantly in foundation and definitely lacking in intention. And one of the most common things that I see is a very unclear brand message and a very unclear marketing message. And so if you're not clear about how you're going to market and how you're going to reach your ideal customer, it's going to be very, very hard for you to develop predictability in your business.
So when a firm comes to you and they're lacking in the foundation stage, how long does it take for them typically to get all that kind of figured out?
So it doesn't really take a lot of time to figure it out. What takes more time is explaining why it's important. Because a lot of times firms will come to me, like our bread and butter firms, probably 2 to 3 million. That's what we usually get hired on. When I say bread and butter, I mean by new clients. We have a lot of firms. I think we have over 20 firms that are almost at 8 figures and above. But these firms come to us, and you have to convince them that the vision, mission, values, and service standards are important. They're like, how does this even translate into more money? And so it takes some time to walk them through that while simultaneously working on the marketing plan with them. But in terms of doing it, if you sat down for 2 days with your executive team, you could probably do it pretty quickly. It's just some people don't find the value in it, so they don't spend a lot of time wanting to do it. And then it's like week after week, hey, do we have the vision? Oh, I'm going to work on that, Yeah. So it takes a little bit more time.
You mentioned the marketing plan. Is that a piece of the second phase, the intentionality phase, or is that something that you start on right in the beginning just to show them some wins?
So it is a piece of the second phase, the intentionality phase. But if you're already at $1 million, we probably will start working on it simultaneously, simply because you want to see some wins, right? And so a lot of times firms will come to you because they think they need marketing help. In fact, that's probably one of the primary things that people come to us for. They say, I need to figure out how to get more business. And I've said this from the stage, and I will die by this statement. Marketing is the easiest thing you can do in your business. It's literally so easy to get clients. It is so easy to get clients because of what I just said. If 1 million people know you, there's still 330 million people that don't know you. So all you have to do is get in front of the other people that don't know you, and you're going to achieve, you're going to attract more clients. The hardest part of the business is actually people. People are just very difficult, And so
I'm telling you, I have never heard someone articulate that, because that's exactly what we have felt. We have been behind the curve since we started. We've had more clients than we could handle. It's always been people issues, always. And it's so hard to get that right.
I heard Gary Vee one time say that you got to become basically a psychologist. You got to figure out the mindset of people, what motivates people, what gets them up out of bed every single day. And that's really hard, because everybody has a different motivation, and some people don't even know the motivation that's driving them. Some people are being driven by subconscious things that they have from their childhood. We always talk about the baby, the daddy issues or whatever. I was going to say baby daddy issue, but some people have that too. But
I know what that is.
Yeah, but some people have the daddy issues or mommy issues or whatever, and so you're having to deal with people who are bringing in their baggage from previous relationships, and so. That's the people are the hardest part, but marketing's easy. But we get a lot of people who say, I need help marketing. And I'm like, I got you. Let's just do it right here. And so we have a 3-part process for developing your marketing plan. It's identifying your spend, figuring out your strategy, and then moving into the allocation stage. But once you figure out the trick of marketing, it's basically turning on and turning off the faucet, turning on and turning off the faucet. Recently we were at our firm, we were doing some marketing changes, and so we had pulled back on some spend, and then we decided we're going to spend a little bit more. The next thing you know, we're signing 50 more people per month. It's literally clockwork. It's not rocket science. I wish it was, because maybe I would be able to charge more for the services, but yeah, it's not rocket science at all.
You talked about helping your clients get familiar with their brand or identify it. How do you do that?
So part of figuring out your brand is going through this exercise of understanding what you want to be known for. And I believe that the business brand flows naturally from the personal brand. And so you first have to ask yourself, what do I as a person, the owner of this business, want to be known for? What do I want people to recognize in me and about me at the end of my career? You know, a lot of times we say, what do you want written on your tombstone? I don't even think it's that far. I think it's when you finish working, what do you want people to say about you? And then your brand flows naturally from that. When you think about going back to Gary Vee, which I love following him, and his entire brand is about happiness, like be happy, be happy, be happy. It flows from his genuine desire for people to be happy. He wants his entire vision and mission and life to be about showing people the way to be happy. Well, guess what? His business is about that too. His marketing company is about that. His personal brand is about, everything is about that. And so I think it's figuring out, what do you want for your life? For me, my personal vision statement was to lead a life of significance. And I asked myself when I was developing a 8-figure firm, well, how do I become significant? Well, I become significant by being the leading authority in law firm building, meaning I'm going to help as many people as I possibly can build their law firm. And if I did that, I'd become significant. And if I did that, I'd become the leading authority in law firm building. And if I did that, I'd create a legacy. And so I think that defining your personal brand is figuring out, what is it that you want to be known for? And then how do I communicate that through my business? And that's the change right there. That's the switch that you have to make.
I love that, Luis. So you talked about turning the faucet on and off and seeing a direct or a response from that. That sounds a lot like direct response, which is majority of what we do. How do you think about direct response marketing versus the longer term brand plays? How do you blend that, mix that, think about that from a budgeting standpoint? I'm asking a ton of questions here because I think you're going with it. Okay.
So I have what's called a ratio-based analysis to the size of your firm. So from 0 to 3 million in revenue, your firm should be about 80% direct response, because you don't have the time to wait for your branding to kick in. From 3 million to 8 million in revenue, your firm should start making the transition from direct response into more branding. And the reason is that direct response is just too costly to stay focused there. And direct response increases with time. It's no different than any other item. So if you think about pay-per-click or LSAs or lead generation as a product, then, and you compare that to any other product, whether it's food or, you got your phone, right? Your phone used to cost $599. I remember when the iPhone came out, $599. Now an iPhone's like $2,000. The price has gone up, right? In pay-per-click, and I tell this story in my book, The King of Growth. I remember signing personal injury cases for $500 on pay-per-click. I remember that time. Today, a case is going to cost you $3,000 on pay-per-click. And by the way, the average fee per case is about the same. 15 years ago, I'd pay $500 to acquire a case, and I would generate about $10,000 to $12,000 per case. Today, it's $3,000 to acquire a case, and I make $10,000 to $12,000 per case.
Wow.
Because the inflationary expenditure, or the inflationary nature of the expenditure, has significantly outpaced the benefit that you get from that same product or that same business or that same client. And so it's hard to compete on that space. So what you'll see is, over time, two things will happen if you depend directly on direct response, and that is a reduction in your profitability, and also what we call the stagnation effect, which is you'll start to plateau unless you've done a lot of work in the depth, right? And so I talk about width and depth strategy in the book, which is width is all about advertising, depth is about relationship building. So if you focus there, maybe you can overcome it to some extent. And so at 8 million, you want to start transitioning to where you're more tilted, at least 51%, I say 60, on branding. And then when you're at 8 million and above, you want to go 80% branding, 20% direct response. Now, the amount that you spend on marketing is important here. We spend 25% on marketing of last year's revenue. That's where we kind of create that initial spend. And so if you do this right now we're like 85% branding, 15% direct response, but we also have an $8 million marketing budget. So like, it's still a significant amount of direct response. It's just not the primary amount of direct, our marketing budget.
Yeah. I'm embarrassed. We're at 15 million, and I think we probably spend 90% on DR.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I wouldn't say it's horrible. What I would say is that the cost of acquisition will significantly be reduced 2 to 3 years from now if you start spending on brand, which is what we saw. So our average cost of acquisition is about $1,200 per case, and that's in the PI space. That's incredible for as competitive as it is, and it's directly related to our branding efforts.
Are you seeing clicks over $100 on the PI term?
Oh yeah, 300 to 400. Yeah, it's very, very competitive. That's why we were forced into branding. See, because we just couldn't compete in direct response. It was just too expensive. I'm working with the firm right now where their direct response cost per acquisition is almost $4,000, and they've been doing it for 10 years. And they didn't have enough encouragement from somebody like me to go heavier on the brand, which is what we're about to do.
Yeah. I love how thoughtful you are on these ratios and understanding these big picture things. So now, as you've looked at firms and watched them grow, you mentioned here, you gave an example of the 0 to 3 million, 3 to 8 million, 8 million plus as being kind of steps for branding reallocation versus direct response. What about the people side of it from a scaling standpoint? Where have you seen kind of like those steps, those break points that firms get to this number and then they stagnate, to get to this number and they plateau? What have you seen throughout 0 to 25 million, let's say?
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is, I can go micro on this, but I'm just going to do a macro analysis. The macro is from 0 to 3 million. It's basically a client acquisition problem. Like, everybody's trying to figure out how to get more clients, because a $3 million firm at $200,000 in revenue per employee isn't really that many people, right? It's like 15, 20 people at the most. So you don't have really a people issue from 0 to 3 million. You need 15 people-ish, 17, 20 people, but one leader can manage all those people. So there's not a big issue there. So I think the first breaking point is when you get to 3 million and then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have 40 employees and I need some better employees. I can't have a bunch of generalists. I need some specialists in here. And so I think the first real breaking point is 7 figures for a reason unrelated to people. And that's the moment where you begin to believe that this is easy. Like, you get to 1 million, you're like, this is easy. I just made 350,000, 400,000 on my 1 million. This is easy. I'm going to stack millions. That's not how building an 8-figure business works. And you know this because you've already done it, right? So just because you get to 1 million doesn't mean you can get to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, right? So that's the first breaking point unrelated to people. The first breaking point related to people is 3 million, when you realize you need specialists. You need a leader. You need somebody to come in there, and you're going to need more specialists as you go from 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The second breaking point is 8 to about 15 million. And that's where you need leaders. That's where you need to be able to duplicate yourself. You need leaders who actually are leveraged. Those are hard to find. Those are 6-figure people. And you start kind of coming to grips with the fact that you're going to have 6-figure non-lawyers in your business. Like, that becomes very, very tough to kind of like convince yourself, like, wait a second, you tell me I need a director of ops that's going to cost me $150,000. My lawyer's making $150,000. And then so now you start having a challenge, from a mindset standpoint. Between 15 million and where we are now, which is approaching almost 40, what you realize is you need like real generals. Like, I'm not talking about mid-tier leaders. You need real executives at that point. And those people are extremely difficult to find. And so I think that at 15 million is where you start finding, because at 15 million, you could have 10 leaders who are managing about $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue as it relates to people. But at 20 million, 25 million, you need like a general. You need that COO, you need that CMO, you need that CFO. And if you're not capable of doing it, you have to find them. And those people are very hard to find.
Yes, they are, for sure. So of those folks on your firm, your generals, even your next layer down leadership management team there, how many of those are lawyers versus non-lawyers?
So because we're staff heavy, we only have 2 lawyers that are technically on our leadership team, and it's our managing attorneys. So we have 2 managing attorneys. Everyone else is non-lawyer executive team and leadership team.
Yeah. From a management standpoint, you had challenges with lawyers accepting direction from non-lawyers?
So, well, that's the reason we have the managing attorneys, is to make it a little bit more palatable, because they work in conjunction with our COO, director of finance, director of people, to actually effectuate any kind of change that we need in the business. But I've always said that 10 lawyers is harder to manage than 100 people, because they are tough. Lawyers are tough. You know this. Lawyers are tough. They are. There's better words to say: hard-headed, ego-driven. I mean, we could go on, but lawyers are tough.
Tough is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, they're tough, and so they don't even follow other lawyers sometimes, and so you have to find the right lawyer to come in there. And we have a really great managing attorney right now who manages one side of our team, and he just has the experience. He has the reputation, the experience. He has the resume, and he has, more than anything, the disposition for it. It's a collaborative but firm disposition, which is, hey, I want to work with you here, but you have to do X, Y, and Z if you want to work at this firm. And we kind of fell into him, and it's hard to find those people.
Yeah, they're gems when you do, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So with your partner at the law firm, is he also your partner in the consulting business?
Yep. Yeah, he is. So yeah, we have multiple businesses. We also have a property company. So we've bought commercial property as well, and a nonprofit.
Yeah, wow, interesting. What's your nonprofit about?
So our nonprofit currently is in revamp, because in the past it was spread too thin, and what ended up happening, and this is just some advice: if you start a nonprofit, people will start asking you for money. But we were at its peak last year. We raised about $250,000 for several different nonprofits, but we were focusing on leadership. We were focusing on people who had been injured and who needed scholarships for school. So it was education, leadership, and we have a large Hispanic population here in the North Atlanta area, and so we were also contributing to some Hispanic causes as well.
Oh, wow, cool. So from a leadership thinker standpoint, who do you follow? Who is someone you really look up to?
I mean, when I think about just leadership in general, I've read everything that John Maxwell has ever written. I think that he is one of the smartest leaders. I mean, he's written 80 books, so he's got a lot of on his resume. But I love following him, and then I also like following people who just, they're the influencers, the Alex Hormozis, the Gary V's, Grant Cardone. I mean, I like following these guys, but from a what I would think an education or theoretical standpoint, I think John Maxwell has really nailed what it is to be a leader.
Yeah, agreed, completely. So, last question: what's the biggest thing you're working on right now?
So right now, I'm really wanting to step into what I believe my calling is, which is to speak and to be an author. And so I have 3 book releases coming out next year that I'm really excited about. And I believe that these are going to be just a continuation of the journey to learning how to build law firms and build people. And so just really excited about the book releases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Any teaser you want to give us on what they're about?
So yeah, I mean, I one of them is called Limitless Leadership. I'm actually co-writing that with my director of operations. It's basically how to become your best self in a world that wants to keep you contained. I'm also writing a book called Partnerships Suck: How to Prevent Business Divorce by Being Fully Aligned. And then my third book is a second edition to The King of Growth, where I'm going to expand on the marketing strategies that I've already talked about. Yeah.
Awesome. And how would people find you? What's the best way for them to connect you and get in your orbit?
Yeah, they can find me at luisscottjr.com, LuissScottJR.com. They can find all my links, my books, speaking engagements, anything right there on that website.
Awesome, Luis. This has been awesome. I'm gonna get your books. I assure you that I will read both by the time we talk again. So,
Awesome.
Just really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.